Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner. I've got two special guests joining me. It's Dan Waters and it's Ram V. How are you, gents?
Good.
Yeah, excited to be here talking about the new books.
Right on. And we're here to talk about your new conjoined crime project, which is available. Both books we're about to talk about are available for pre-order from the links attached to this conversation. And that's The One Hand and The Six Fingers. And if I remember correctly, guys, the One Hand publishes first and The Six Fingers comes along very shortly afterwards. But you're playing in a kind of interlinked wheelhouse. So before you tell me about the books in specific, how did this project emerge?
I'll take it because it emerged at 4 a.m. from a day of me reading Cormac McCarthy's Sunset Limited, and then listening to a podcast that Dan had recommended to me about post-work societies. And the two ideas just had this kind of weird marriage in my head at some 3 a.m. in the morning. And my first reaction was to message Dan and go, Dan, are you up at 3 a.m. in the morning? And Dan goes, yes. I go, cool, can you take a call? And so we ended up having a call at 3 in the morning, where I talked to him about this idea of doing these kind of two narratives. But it was a very preliminary idea. And I knew one half of what I wanted to do with the story, and the other half I knew it has to be someone else. And I also knew that it had to be someone else who would be telling their own story. So that's kind of what I pitched to Dan. And yeah, Dan, for his part, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were equally excited, and we chatted a bunch of stuff right then and there.
Yeah, it sort of kind of, led to, it was one of those big sort of creative conversations where stuff just starts sort of rolling out, and sort of nebulous ideas I had, which I didn't have a home for yet, seemed to like slot into the other half of what you were talking about. So yeah, but this was back in what, 2018?
Something like that. I think 1 year before the pandemic hit. So
yeah. So 2018, 2019,
ago.
some point in there. So it was something that we really sort of stewed for a long time, before actually putting, well, not pen to paper. We were definitely doing a lot of that already, but sort of actually getting into production on the books.
Yeah, and I feel like that's always a good sign when an idea stays with you over a period of years, and it doesn't sort of decrease in excitement or enthusiasm. It just keeps building on itself, just keeps gathering layers. I feel like that's always a great sign that you've got something interesting, you've got something that's worth pushing on. And so yeah, we had been talking about it the whole time, but didn't really start considering, like, okay, what's production going to look like? Who are the artists going to be until a couple of years ago.
That's such an interesting journey. In my previous life as a journalist, we often used to live by that well-worn adage that nothing good ever happens after 2 a.m. But this gives the lie to that, right?
Well, I hope that's not the case, because about half my work happens after 2 a.m. So
and that was going to be my point. That kind of that zone, that 3 to 6 zone, I've often found is absolutely brilliant for creativity, and letting your creative mind go to places that are, it's kind of semi dreamscape, semi inspiration, and you can have really, it seems to me like you guys, I've incepted that idea at a very interesting time when your brain's wide open.
Yeah,
I feel like,
I think it definitely depends on how much whiskey is involved. There's a sort of there's a ramp up, and then there's a definite point of diminishing returns. When you hit 5 a.m. and you're halfway through the bottle. But other than that,
we won't talk about those ideas, Dan.
The there's a
Those aren't
macro,
ideas; those are arguments.
there's a macro version of that, which is the like over time you find that whiskey's not so good for your liver, not within the course of one evening, but one extended, the thing about writing and drinking over like say a 30-year period, and I'm here to attest to that this is true. It can have a deleterious effect on your renal system. So at a certain point, your body starts going, I don't really want you to get to explore your creativity in this manner anymore. But when you're dealing with like noir and crime, what better way? It would seem to me to kick that kind of project off. So guys, what is
drinking?
Yeah, right on. What's the premise?
Okay, so we'll take on the premise in two separate chunks.
Right.
The premise for the one hand is a hard-boiled detective, ARI NASSER, who works in the Neo Novena police department, on the day of his retirement, discovers that a serial killer he thought he put away twice in his career, an original first, a copycat after, the same kinds of murders have started to happen on the very last day of his retirement. And so he gets sucked back in, pulled back into putting away this killer called the one-hand killer, for one last time. And we follow that rabbit hole or that spiral, if you will, down to its logical end in the one hand and in the Six Fingers.
Six Fingers is about Johannes Vale, who's a Neo Novena archaeology student, who's a bit of a horrible little sod, who's very obsessed with control and being in control of his own life. And then he sort of wakes up one day seemingly having committed a murder with the MO of the one-hand killer, which is, you can probably see where the connective tissue is between the two books there. And he's sort of, rather than being devastated that he's hurt someone, he is outraged that he's seemingly done something without control and without knowing that he's done it. So he starts digging into the sort of past of the city and the MO of this killer who has been put away years ago, and trying to figure out why he did what he did.
So cat and mouse game, cats in one book, mouses in the other.
Fantastic. And in terms of the shape and the fabric of the story that you're telling, how many books have you got to tell the narrative?
So it's each of us doing 5 issues. So one hand is going to be 5 issues, Six Fingers is going to be 5 issues, and the release schedule is always going to be one hand issue 1, Six Fingers issue 1, one hand issue 2, Six Fingers issue 2.
And approximately 2 weeks apart, is that right?
Yeah, approximately 2 weeks apart. And the hope is that you read both narratives and you piece together a third truth that exists between the two narratives, if you will.
What it seems to me is that from your description is it's particularly suited as well to kind of to reading in real time. I mean, I love reading collected editions of everything, but actually this project, I thought this when I was looking at the stuff that the pre-press stuff that had come out, it seems particularly suited to following it through as it's published, just in terms of revealing the layers of the narrative and the alternate storytelling. Is that something you were conscious of when you're putting together?
I think we're both always kind of thinking about interesting ways of using the format, and the fact that single issues, the comics are read that way on a monthly or a bi-weekly basis, is an interesting thing to kind of play with, especially when you've got 2 books to do it with. So every you could just pick up one of the series or the other, but really getting the sort of tempo of the call and response between the two, the 2 issue 1s and the 2 issue 2s is really, I think, something we put quite a lot of care into. So yeah, it just seemed like an interesting way to play with that format, the single issue format.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
that-
I also feel like, you know, the conversation certainly these days always seems to be like, oh, what about this format, this single issue format? How do we do something new with it? How do we get people to talk about it and engage with it in interesting ways? And I feel like there are all of these opportunities that exist uniquely in the comics medium, such a design heavy medium, not only in the content, but also in the way your books come out and in the way they're created. And um, I've always been of the opinion that the art should extend outside of the contents of the object, if you will. So the art should be, everything you do with the book should be about telling the story. And so if you think about it even narratively, this is very much a pulp detective kind of story. And if you think about readers collecting these issues and then reading them in order, trying to reframe and constantly refresh their assumptions about the story because they're reading two different perspectives, you're kind of pushing the reader to be a detective in some ways. And I feel like it's very hard to do that outside of opportunities that exist in this kind of single issue monthly or bi-weekly format.
Yeah, like, and even the covers, every, Sumit Kumar draws the six fingers, Laurence Campbell draws the one hand, and every A cover for the six fingers is Sumit, every B cover for the one hand is by Sumit, and vice versa. The A covers on the one hand are by Laurence. The B covers of Six Fingers are by Laurence, and they're
So
all
quite
connecting
literally
covers.
putting
So
puzzle pieces together.
right. Yeah. I love it. And when you ultimately come to collect, will you kind of respect that sequencing when the project's collected?
yeah, I think it's the intended order of reading both books is to read them to read the call and response between the two books. So that's exactly the plan.
Yeah, I mean, we gave it quite a lot of thought. There were some conversations about collecting them separately at first and then putting them together. But I think, again, because the readership is so different between the single issue format and then the book market, if you will, we felt like when these go to the book market, you only get one shot. You don't get the water cooler conversation. You only get people coming in and picking up a book. And so because that opportunity for conversation is lower, we said, okay, then we get one shot. We'd much rather give the reader at that point the full experience rather than having them discover later that, oh, wait, there's another book that I should get.
Wait, I read half of this.
I mean, you could still read one book and you would still get a complete story.
Yeah.
But you would certainly have the sense that, wait, there's certainly an underlying narrative here that I'm missing. And so, yeah, we felt like it made sense to collect the books together in one sort of trade and put the issues in reading order. So you'll be reading chapter 1 will be issue 1 of one hand, chapter 2 will be issue 1 of Six Fingers, chapter 3 will be issue 2 of one hand.
Brilliant. I love it. And what's your feelings about working within this particular genre within comics? I mean, I know there are elements of both of your works that touch to varying degrees, often sometimes quite heavily on the genre anyway. But a pure noir crime story, what kind of what's that like to work on? What's your experience with it been?
I mean, I think noir as a qualifier of genre is actually quite wide and not limiting at all. You could do horror noir, you could do sci-fi noir, you could do crime noir. And I would say that while this story appears most immediately to be crime noir, it is all of those things. It is sci-fi noir, it is horror noir as well. And I love the genre in comics because I think comic book art, and certainly the artists that we're working with here, Laurence Campbell and Sumit Kumar. That sort of heavy ink textured style really works for the genre as well, and that's something that I started off my writing career with Black Mamba. We had that sort of heavy inky noir art, and it's kind of nice to return to that here. And oftentimes people think of crime noir as this kind of visually grounded storytelling. It doesn't have the sort of big bombast of sci-fi or beautiful fantasy artwork. But I think people undervalue how much design is a language in comics. And I think certainly with these books, with One Hand and Six Fingers, design plays a huge role in the narrative form. And I think both Sumit and Laurence have taken really well to that idea that, okay, the visual flair of this book comes through its design. And yeah, Tom Miller, who's done design across both books, is to credit for that as well.
Yeah, noir and like detective stories always feels like coming home a bit, because I think they are at the root of a lot of particularly like the kind of superhero stuff that we both do. And my first book was also, Rom's first book was Black Mamba. My first book was Limbo, with Casper Wingard, which is another detective story. And there's just like there's a purity to detective stories. Oh, thank you. There's a purity to detective stories as well, because most stories are about someone uncovering something, whether it's about themselves, whether it's about other people, whether it's about the world around them. That's just the nature of stories to begin with. And a detective just gives you the purest way to do it. It's like why is he looking to uncover things? Because he's a bloody detective. All right, let's get on with it.
Yeah, very, very, very well said, gents. I mean, I'm completely intrigued by the project. I love the way you've put it together, and both of the titles we're discussing, the One Hand and the Six Fingers, are available for pre-order from the links attached to this conversation. Very much look forward to reading this story as it rolls out. And thanks very much, as always, for joining me today, guys.
Pleasure.
Take care. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.